Our topic for Sabbath School is going to be, how do you change your health behaviors? Your health behavior. Changing health behaviors is what I've spent 40 years at. And I realize that we can spend our time this morning talking about cholesterol or how your brain is or isn't doing. But if we don't understand how to change our behavior, then this is a great academic exercise. And it's true, education comes first, so you know what to do and maybe some easier ways to do it. But when you deal with health behavior change, you deal with three major areas. The first area is they call what is your thought process, and we call it thinking big. First of all, do you believe if you change your behavior that you're going to get a result? That's step one, because see, if you really don't believe that you're going to get a result from what you do, then you're very likely not going to do it. We call this self-efficacy, a fancy word we use in health education, that if you do this behavior, it will work for you. For example, you may see your local newspaper and they say lose 14 pounds in 14 days. And at first you go, that's nonsense. The next week you see the same ad, lose 14 pounds in 14 days. By the time you see the ad 7 times, guess what happens to your mind? You start to doubt your cynicism and you say, maybe. And then when they start putting people's pictures up next to their ad that joined, then you go, it worked for them, but will it work for me? Are these just testimonies? Did 1,000 people do it and only 4 get success? That's typically why we don't put a lot of value in testimonies unless it's your personal testimony. And then after you see these pictures time and time again, and then you see your next door neighbor's picture on that newspaper, and you starts to get more believable. Now, disease works the same way. When you have a parent, a sibling, or a close friend at work that has a heart attack, what happens to you? You know, how's my mortality? What am I doing with here? So your first major step in health behavior change is believing that it will work for you. If you don't believe that, it doesn't go anywhere. It really doesn't go anywhere at all. And I've got a quote that I want to read for you. And I want to read the quote, the important part, and then I want to look at the context of this. It says this, and once again, the Bible gives a lot of indicators for healthy outcomes. James is an excellent book to read if you want to find out what the outcome is supposed to be. Faith without works is, well, wait a minute. I thought we're saved by faith, and I believe in righteousness by faith, and I believe that faith changes things. How could James say a statement like that? Faith without works is dead. Well, listen to this statement. It says, the lack of stability in regard to the principles of health reform is a true index of your character and your spiritual strength. How can that be? I run marathons. My cholesterol is around 100. You start going through the whole list. And then I hear this back in my mind and go, I hear my fellow Seventh-day Adventists say, they've stole our health message. They've just read something about how these people are doing this or getting healthier or changing their diet or going vegan or eating plant-based, and we hear all this stuff, and they stole our health message. I propose to you that the person that came out of doesn't understand the health message at all. Because they look at the health message as activities, And if you perform these activities, then you're healthy. I propose that that's not our health message at all. Because what you're focusing on is what's your cholesterol level. You're focusing on how many steps you walked that morning. Both are great activities. But the essence of our health message is one single thing, and that is getting people ready to go to heaven. If you miss that, then you just become a healthier sinner. And I look at my career and in my office, and I go, am I helping people to be just healthier sinners? And yes, I like to be healthy. I like to enjoy good health. I like to wake up in the morning and have more energy than what I need for my day. I like to wake up and, I lecture at various conferences, and I was lecturing at our local hospital for a group of doctors that morning, and these doctors come in half awake and half asleep, and they're looking for their coffee, and they have the nerve to offer me coffee. I go, what do you want from me? You're the one that's half dead. I'm wound up tight. I got a day in front of me. I got patients to see. What are you talking about? Just be quiet. Let's get this lecture done because I've got to go do some work. So if you need something to get you started in the morning, something's really wrong. It may be sleep deprivation. It may be staying up to midnight. I don't know. But remember, the essence of all health reform is to get you ready for the kingdom. If that is not your goal, we've lost it. Now let's read this quote again. The lack of stability in regard to the principles of health reform is the true index of their character and their spiritual strength. Now, I read it different that time. Did you pick out the difference? It said there and there, and I said mine or yours before. Now, I'm going to put this in proper context because I think it applies to all of us, but this particular quote from Testimonies, Volume 2, was written, and here's the first part of the quote. A wonderful indifference, now I'm not sure why she called it wonderful, because listen to the indifference, has been manifested upon the important subject by those right at the heart of the work. Second Testimony 4:87. This was directed to the leaders of our church at that point in time. But I'm not going to let you and me off the hook that easy. Because I believe that each of us needs to be a leader, at least of your own spiritual life, if not leading someone else. So I think this applies to me, and I believe it applies to all of us here. But my question is, why do you think that how you believe and what you do and your reaction to health reform is a true index of your spiritual strength? Let me turn it around. Do you want more spiritual strength? If you want more spiritual strength, then this is an indicator, well, I've got it or I don't. So sometimes when you get down on your knees and you ask the Lord, Lord, what is going on? What is happening? Why can't I overcome? Or why do I keep falling in this same pit day in and day out, day in and day out? Then you found your answer for what health reform really is. Health reform always starts on your knees, not at your table. Health reform starts by you committing your life to God and making God your primary goal for health reform. Otherwise, you and I are going to argue about cheese and sour cream till the cows come in. And by the way, I don't eat either, and I'd recommend you don't. But that is not the essence. The essence is the why. And when you get the motivation right, there's no more argument. That doesn't mean that you may not have a desire or may even fall, but you have the desire right. Now here's the benefit to your health message. You have a God in heaven who wants you to be healthy more than even you do. You have a God in heaven who will give you all the power to lose that 10, 50, 75 pounds, whatever you need to. You have all the power you need, and the only block is whether you believe. So when you see that picture in the newspaper, it says 14 pounds in 14 days, They're just losing it because they're going to starve you. By the way, that's how you lose weight, you know, right? You have to starve, which means you eat less than what you're expending. There's no tricks to the trade, folks. Even if I give you hormones, even if I give you human growth hormone or gonadotropin hormone and all these shots that people take, you know what it is? It's just a way of starving, and you may not feel as much. Back in the olden days, when I first got out of school, guess what we gave mostly ladies, but guess what we gave them to lose weight? Methamphetamine. Now, if you do that, they want to lock you up and put you away for 5 years. That's what doctors were giving. And ladies would come in and say, it's incredible, I can clean my house 3 times in one day. And I don't even get hungry. I said, yeah, you're slightly nauseated too, aren't you? He goes, yeah, I kind of feel kind of queasy. And that's what they gave the truck driver, except those guys called them black bennies when they drive down the road so they could put in 4,000 miles that week without wrecking the rig. There is no shortcuts to health reform, but there is a God in heaven who will help you accomplish it. So with that context, I get to talk about some health. But if we take what I'm talking about out of context, then I'm just going to tell you a bunch of great facts. So at the conclusion to our meetings here, here's how I know whether we've been successful. Your refrigerator and your closets where you store your food will look different. Because anything in there that is not going to give you health reform needs to be left alone. The Bible asks a very simple question. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread or food or nourishing? And so we go back and look at our closets, our food pantry, our refrigerator. I want to read a paragraph before this, because I appreciate this lady so much and how she allowed herself to be used of God, Ellen White I'm speaking about. Here's what she says, because the context is so important. It almost sounds like she's bragging, but for a good reason. It says, I have a well-set table on all occasions. No one starves at my house, folks. I make no change for visitors. That's why I accuse people of, why do we invite people to our house and then try to kill them off? We fix the richest food, the richest stuff, the richest dessert for our friends, and we bring them over and we try to kill them. I know I'm being a little bit facetious. I make no change for visitors, whether believers or unbelievers. Are you proud of what you do? If you're doing it for the right purpose and your purpose is firm, then you've got nothing. In fact, people will actually respect you more. I intend never to be surprised by an unreadiness to entertain at my table from 1 to half a dozen extra who would chance to come in. Definitely prepared. And whether it's vegetable soup or a 5-course meal, I think you would still be invited to her table, and she'd be glad to offer it to you. I have enough simple, healthful food ready to satisfy hunger and nourish the system. She says, simple food. If any want more than this, they are at liberty to find it elsewhere. Pretty straightforward. At her bedtime, Ellen White would say, you can stay here as long as you like. I'm going to go to bed. She wasn't being ornery or facetious. She just believed that the thing. It says, no butter or flesh meats of any kind come on my table. Cake is seldom found there. I generally have an ample supply of fruits, good bread, and vegetables. Our table is always well patronized. So somehow people liked her food, right? Or maybe they liked the atmosphere, or both. And all who partake of the food do well and improve upon it. All sit down with an Epicurean appetite. I forgot to look up what Epicurean is, but hopefully a good appetite, a strong appetite, and eat with relish the bounties supplied by our Creator. And then the paragraph right after that is the one I read for you. After she says, we have bounty, you're invited, when you eat my menu, you feel better, you leave and you go, that was great. And it says, well patronized, which means you probably would like to go back for a second meal. And then she says, can you believe with what we're offering people that we have difficulty with our fellow brothers and sisters of not realizing that what I'm offering them here is not good bread and vegetables and fruit. I'm offering them a clean enough mind to understand eternal values. Do you realize the gift that we're given? And it doesn't get old. The reason I feel I've been as successful as I have been in my career is because I believe the spirit of prophecy. Amen. It has not led me wrong on one event of one diagnosis of one person for the last 40 plus years that I've been in practice. Amen. It doesn't go old. I don't really care what the scientific literature says if it conflicts with what Ellen White says. They'll just wait a few years and they clean up their act and they say, we were wrong. So I just have to be patient. If you know John Harvey Kellogg's history, he said the same thing. His fellow doctors would come to him and say, why do you seem to be 5 years ahead, John? He goes, I'm going to tell you. He says, when Ellen White writes something, I put it into practice and it takes you guys 5 years to figure it out and catch up. Whether he was treating malaria, without quinine, by the way, whether he was a hydrotherapy at the sanitarium. Battle Creek Sanitarium started out as Western Health Reform Institute in 1866. Our church started in 1863 as an official Seventh-day Adventist church. Can you imagine a top goal of a relatively small group of believers putting their top goal within 3 years developing a sanitarium? I don't know how much sacrifice that took. I don't know who put funds up. But that must have been a strong enough belief system that brought them to the conclusion that I'm trying to bring us to this morning. And that is that what you believe about how you take care of your God-given temple that you have is a direct correlation to how God can work with you. It's that simple. Amen. And if that is not the highest motive for taking care of yourself, there's nothing else higher. Back to Western Health Reform Institute. Before John Harvey Kellogg came there, he didn't come there until 1876. He was a young man, and by the way, James and Ellen White put him through medical training. Between the 10 years between 1866 and 1876, they treated over 2,000 patients in the hospital or their sanitarium at that time. And remember, people didn't go to the sanitarium in those days because they smashed their toe, or because they had a hangnail, or because they had a runny nose, or because they had this. You must realize that these were hardy farm people that probably had never seen or rarely ever seen a doctor in their whole life. They didn't have well baby care back then because babies were well already, just don't mess them up. They didn't have the 50-year-old colonoscopies because they wouldn't do that to a person. That's something you read about the mission field if you're in Africa, to think that a witch doctor would stick a tube up your other side. Yes, I mean, what we do, when I was a kid and listened to Eric B. Hare, which I appreciated, listen to him tell mission stories, I'm thinking, oh man, those witch doctors, they are really out of it. They'll have people eating peacock tongues and making a tea out of 3 bones and doing all this stuff. And then I look at colonoscopies and what we do to people over here in our medical community. I'm going, sounds vaguely familiar that you would do such a harsh treatment for humans. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Back to 1866, 1870, out of 2,000 patients at the hospital, and these weren't just a hangnail patient. Guess how many people died at that hospital in 10 years? If we had anywhere close to this track record for any hospital across the United States, that administrator, that medical staff, they would be put on Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Medical Prize, whatever we have for them. We lost 10 patients in 10 years of severe patients, and it had to be a rip-roaring infection before they ever came in without antibiotics and without prednisone or any other steroid, without major painkillers except the biggies where we just put them on opium, but believe me, that would not be used in the sanitarium. One person per year, average for 10 years. What's this? Where did you say? This is the Western Health Reform Institute, the precursor sanitarium before Battle Creek came along and renamed, before John Harvey Kellogg. But the amazing thing is this wasn't about the nursing staff. This wasn't about the doctors. This was about God. And God blessed their simple efforts. Plant-based diet. Can you believe that? Exercise, fresh air, hydrotherapy for relieving pain. And if you know how to use hydrotherapy correctly, it can be a major asset. Yes, we didn't have as much heart disease in 1866. We didn't have as many diabetics, I will admit that. But as far as, quote, intensity or classification of diseases, they didn't come there unless the half got their leg cut off and got stuck in some machine or got drugged across the field by the old mule. Yeah, these were not easy cases. Amazing. That is your heritage. That is our heritage. We were never supposed to be in acute care. That is not our mission. Our mission is to do a lifestyle of seminars, lifestyle of sanitariums, lifestyle programs, because why? Because it is the entering wedge of the gospel. That is why. If the world needs to do surgery, they can do surgery. Your job, my job, is to do lifestyle change in an effort to change minds and characters for God. See, it's an automatic shoe-in. When I've got a cancer patient that comes in my office, I really have the upper hand, not because they need help, but because they're thinking very seriously. And one of the questions I'll ask them is, why do you think you got this? And you would be surprised how many times, Adventist, non-Adventist, Baptist, whoever, how many times they'll say, I think it's a wake-up call. I think God is trying to speak to me. And I find more people outside of my church that get it than inside my church. So that's why I'm taking this time with you this morning. I'll go, why do you think? Well, I think God's trying to talk to me. And then this one lady came out and she said, you know, my body is the temple of God, and that is why I need to take care of it. I go, you got it. You see, when a person gets that, then when I tell them to change their diet, guess what they say? And when they get that and you tell them that their cholesterol is too high, you see, if you don't have the motivation right, it's all a battle. And I've spent too many years of my career trying to talk people out of their bad habits instead of telling them why they need to do what they need to do. And if you get the why correct, yeah. And when I need to change a habit, or when you need to change a habit, the way you change your habit is on your knees before you even stand up in the morning. Slide out of bed and get on your knees and ask God and beg Him. Remember Ellen White's struggle with getting off meat. Have you read about that struggle? If I've got my story right, and correct me, I think she went 3 days of eating nothing. Now, that's a pretty powerful addiction, to where you're going to fast, not a bad thing to do, that you're going to fast and get away with it. She did the same with vinegar. When she had a battle, I think she dealt with it between her and the Lord, because it wasn't about how strong she was or that she was just blessed with a stronger will than everybody else. I don't believe that. And I don't believe that for you or for me. So here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give myself less excuses and listen more to God. I'm trying to give myself less opportunities to have a way of getting around something. See, when you teach stop smoking classes, you know that you hear about every excuse known to the human race. And the stop smoking people have got some of the best ones. Well, I got in a wreck. I wrecked my car, and I was so upset. The other person that I ran into had cigarettes, and so I asked him for one. And I go, you started smoking that cigarette, and the deeper you would draw, all of a sudden those dents in your fender started coming out, didn't they? And the more you draw on that cigarette, all of a sudden that bumper would pop. They go, oh, Doc, why are you bothering me? No, I'm trying to make a point. That cigarette did what? One more nail in the coffin. Did it help the car? Did it help the problem? That's what I want them to realize. Because, see, addictions are like spoiled brats. You define the outcome. You tell them what they will do and what they won't do. You do not try to sit down and reason with a 2.5-year-old. They're not mentally capable. You love them. You take care of them. You make sure they're dry. You make sure they're well fed. But they don't get to run the house. Just too big of a job for a 2-year-old kid. So, our remainder of our time this morning, I've got a few more minutes here. I want to talk about something that's shaking America. Let me finish my motivation speech. Number one, we talked about basically you've got to have the right goal. You've got to think big. It's got to be more important into you than your Twinkie. It's got to be more important to you than chocolate. It's got to be more, and you fill in the blank for me, okay? And don't fill in granola because I had that for breakfast. It's got to be more important to you than life itself. He who tries to save his life will lose it. And he who loses his life for Christ's sake, that's what we're really talking about here. Because I have got habits that I grew up with, and I raised chickens, and I've eaten enough eggs for the whole rest of my life. I got my quota in early. I don't have to eat another egg, and I've already got my quota in. And I've already got my quota of eating church meat. That's fried chicken. I've got my quota in, so I don't have to eat any more of that. So I'm stuck with my good old veg. No, I'm not stuck with anything. I have one of those tables that Ellen White was speaking about. So you've got to get your motivation correct, and that starts between your ears, not the first bite. It has nothing to do with food. It has the big why. The second thing is, do it now. You go, wait a minute, I need to, next year or next month or whatever. No. Guess what happens to motivation if you don't take action? Your brain doesn't believe you. Your brain knows you're playing a game. Shakespeare said something important. He said, to thine own self be true. If you're going to lie to anybody, well, by the way, don't lie. But definitely don't lie to yourself. And we're good at that, by the way. It's called protecting the big number one, the self. And then the third level of motivation is no excuses. And I don't care if you say it out loud, as long as you end your sentence with, that doesn't qualify. Oh, I'm sick, that doesn't qualify. Oh, I haven't eaten for 2 days. Well, you're fasting for 3, so that doesn't qualify. Or whatever excuse, I'm tired, I got home late, and all I have is junk food to eat. That doesn't qualify. As long as you allow something to qualify, guess what you've done? We play the game. I play it, you play it. And by the way, you can be a skinny glutton or an overweight glutton. So don't look at me and say, he is not a glutton. You don't know that. This isn't about your waistline. Well, it is too, but what I'm trying to say is that we're talking about who has your heart and who wants to help you control your addictions. And by the way, the number one addiction? Myself. I would do almost anything to try to protect myself. And God says, I have to die to have life. Am I going to take his word for it? I appreciate the thought in the bulletin. It's very short but very profound. It says devotional thought, physical health, and noble thinking. I couldn't have said it better if I had even was the one to originate that. But thank you, because that's what we're going to spend our time on. A pattern is coming to our country And I don't even have to be dynamic because it's dynamic what's happening. Either the last time I was here or one of the times I was here, I told you that diabetes is becoming our number one health risk in our country, and it's continuing to grow. And it's not just the United States, it's all over the world. Right now in America, we have about 1 in 4 people who are what they call pre-diabetic. As a practitioner, I don't believe in pre-diabetic. You either are in a state of insulin resistance or you're not. I happen to believe their number is low. That's 1 in 4 right now of the total population have an insulin resistance problem. By the time you get to age 65, it's going to be basically every other person. And since I'm in that category now, I want to be the other person, not the, you know what I'm saying. I don't think we have to be that way. So, with that, we're looking at this situation here, which is even bigger than being diabetic. I'm sitting in the office now, and people that are 20 years younger than me are making statements that really bothers me. They're trying to tell me something that they know well, not quite their name yet, okay, that they know well. A medical test that they've done, or a medication, and I find myself filling in for them their medication. I'm going, wait a minute. Or then they'll use words like, well, you know what, or that, would you get it, or you know what I'm talking about. I'm going, man, what is happening here? This person's 20 years younger than me, and they're losing their marbles. They have lost it already. I'm going, may God help us. And every one of you in this room knows someone who you go to see and about tears you to pieces because of what? They don't remember. No memory, no life. Life is made up of memories. I happen to believe in conspiracy theories, especially about the devil. You can try these. I happen to believe that he is a master physiologist. I happen to believe that he is setting up our world culture to lose their mind. One major attempt has been through antidepressants. I watch people lose their minds with antidepressants. And they say, well, doc, at least I don't cry anymore. I say, yes, I'm for that. But I am dead. I'm emotionally liable. My husband and I, we used to watch this TV program, and the last time we watched it, he was sitting there with tears running down his cheek, and it didn't even bother me at all. She goes, I'm tired of being numb. I am dead. I have emotionless. I just don't care. And I'm going, these aren't antidepressants. This person, I says, well, are you less depressed? And they go, no. I'm going, these aren't antidepressants. They're drugs that make you not give a rip whether you are depressed. Which means if you don't give a care in the world in this area, it goes through every other area. That's the first red flag I saw. The next red flag I saw was taking statin drugs that decrease the liver's production of cholesterol. And you go, well, we're producing too much cholesterol. Who said? The problem for blocking up your vessels has never been a cholesterol problem. It has always been inflammation of the vessel wall, and God made your body to make cholesterol, to lay down plaque in your vessels to save your life. Here's the problem. When I save your life every day for the next 30 years and lay down plaque because you're irritating your vessels with your lifestyle, diet, stress, you name it, toxins in our environment, when you do that every day, what happens in the long run? The surgeon goes in, he looks at that vessel and sees cholesterol and says, cholesterol's a problem. That's like people thinking that guns are the problem. No, I think the person pulling the trigger is the problem. Cholesterol is the gun. And you see it and you go, get rid of all guns, you're in the problem. So what do? Low-fat food, low-fat milk, low-fat meat, this, and eat more fish and more turkey. And folks, has heart disease changed? Only because cancer has risen so much that it is, so to speak, going to be our second cause of death, but not because it's decreased that much. I was driving through Columbus yesterday. Very slow, by the way. You've all had that experience. And what did I see along the road? Had time to read signs. This one was on a sign of a hospital, James Cancer Institute. I'm going, can you believe it? They're willing to put that sign on the outside of their hospital, admitting utter failure of our population to be healthy. And no, they would not look at that, would they? They put it out there and probably spent, I don't know how many thousands of dollars to advertise that they're what? That we're an utter failure to what's happening for the human race. I take it as a slap in the face. I don't take it as a compliment when you have to dedicate a whole hospital to a lifestyle change that for the most part is totally preventable with lifestyle, at least 80% of it. And I'm going, you know, that hurts to watch it. And now the hospital that I'm associated with has gotten so bold as to call it Advent Health. Well, what does Advent mean to you? So are we going to be healthy at the second coming? So what does the hospitals in general, not just picking on the one I'm associated with, hospitals in general have done what? How many have changed and taken hospital out of their name in the last 10 years? Have you watched it? It's because hospital has a bad complex. But why don't they just be fair? This is a death, disability, and dying complex. Now, when they put that on the wall, that would hopefully make you wake up and say, if I go in there, you know, most people in America go in there and they die. I mean, it's kind of the place you don't want to be. And I know that my doctor friend's going, hey, wait a minute. The reason most people die in a hospital is because they bring dead people, not really, they bring people who are really ill to us. I go, okay, I'm cutting you some slack, but for sake of public opinion, I'm trying to make a point. And that is, hospitals are not for health. And we call it health care, and we call it health this. It's a confusion of terms. Here's our problem right here, or one of our problems. Alzheimer's disease is becoming, along with other dementias, is becoming an American epidemic. And I'm using that word correctly. I read news articles and they say, 300 people have this particular disease, we're having an epidemic. I'm going, you need to go back and study your epidemiology. 300 people is not an epidemic. I don't care where it happens in the world, you're using the wrong terms. When I say epidemic, I'm using it correctly, and this is an epidemic. In fact, we don't even like to admit it. And I'm seeing people in their 40s with this problem. Had a lady come in, I was treating her for a thyroid condition, and she had what we call Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And basically with that disease, you've got an antibody against thyroid, and you're basically following them all over the map. You can medicate, and they can do all for a month or two, and then they'll just drop lower. And you go, well, they need more medication. 6 months later, they're sky high, and you really follow them around. And we know we're fighting an ongoing battle here. It's difficult for them, and it's difficult for us. The reason I'm telling you this story, because this lady went on to get an MRI, I think it was an MRI or CT scan of her brain. I got the report back. Guess what? No brain. Literally, her brain had shrunk to the point, I knew her long term, so this wasn't because she was born that way, okay? Her brain had shrunk to the point where the functional capacity was so low that finally she died. And there was no reason why she should die. The Hashimoto's was why I was seeing her. The brain scan came later, and that's really what got her, not the Hashimoto's. She was dealing with this side of the fence. This is normal brain. Notice the white matter, notice the adhesions over here and the matter. Alzheimer's is a specific brain condition. Dementia is the whole area. Underneath dementia, you have different types of dementia. Alzheimer's is one type of dementia, and it's known because of, when we get down to the microscopic level, the various type of adhesions and the bodies we find in there. Yes? Okay. So, if restricted blood supply to the brain increases dementia risk. They say if, it does. And plaques can develop from hardening of the arteries. What causes high cholesterol and hardened arteries? That's the real question. I'm going to read something. I should have it. Got too many sources I'm trying to pull from this morning. Research from an abstract from this journal, International Union of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. How do you like that for a mouthful? Okay. It says, despite an archive of over 73,000, let me say that again, 73,000 research papers published in the last 2 decades, 20 years on the subject of Alzheimer's disease, little clinical progress has been made relative to how people get sporadic, they're calling it, Alzheimer's disease, and what can be done to help them avoid it. 73,000 research papers, which means 73,000 researchers or teams or combinations. This review spotlights strategic steps that can be a turning point in the dramatic lowering of Alzheimer's prevalence. It also goes on to point out that the medications that they've done and all the pharmaceuticals that they've done are basically worthless. They don't help. And if there's any benefit from some of those, it would be because of their placebo effect. And by the way, I'm not against placebo. Placebo just means you've got a good mind. And if your mind can overcome a disease, then praise God. It's not because you've got some innate ability. I mean, most people, I believe, make themselves sick with their mind. We worry about it. It's going to happen to me. And you watch these people who you would expect to not be here, and they're still laughing at the doctor who told them they were going to die. And what am I supposed to tell them? Keep on laughing? I mean, no, I'm saying I appreciate your attitude. This article goes on, and there's where I come in because my specialty is lifestyle medicine. Patients follow-up access to modified behaviors is needed. It says, tandem to these 4 pillars of prevention, early detection, all that. Early detection that's all it is. If you detect something, we already have the problem. That's not true prevention. It goes on. A proactive lifestyle, here, you want to hear it? Of a healthy diet, coupled with physical and mental activity, should be supplied as part of any therapeutic intervention. We are persuaded by mounting and compelling evidence that Alzheimer's disease is a multifactorial disorder kindled by vascular factors and generate chronic brain hypoperfusion. Chronic brain hypoperfusion, CBH, not CBD, CBH, chronic brain hypoperfusion. So what is the cause of Alzheimer's disease? Lack of blood flow. This is why, when we watch the research, the people who walk the most have the least amount of Alzheimer's. I'm going, well, they don't even play bridge. They haven't got a new computer. They're not even using their mind. Walking doesn't take a lot of brains. So folks, it's not a matter of saying, exercise, think more, think more, think more. I mean, I enjoy learning. I plan to do that for the rest of my years that I have, and hopefully for eternity. But the point is hypoperfusion. When you decrease the blood flow to the brain, you decrease brain function. Let's go on. A pathobiological cascade of biochemical events is in the presence of chronic brain hypoperfusion that leads to oxidative stress, and neurodegeneration appears to involve multiple biofactors including micronutrients, trace metals, lipids, obviously fats, pro-oxidants, as reviewed in the special issue of biofactors I'm talking about. Modulation of these biofactors may help or prevent Alzheimer's disease. The reason I'm reading you that is because remember the central pillar that they're basing everything on. Hypoperfusion. You decrease the blood flow, you get brain shrinkage. That is true whether it's a leg muscle, whether it's your heart muscle, anything in your body. You cut off blood supply or cut off nerve supply, you can get atrophy, and that's brain atrophy. That's what that is. So the people that walk the most, that get the best oxygen, have better brains. Not the bridge players. Not the people taking medication. A word about statin drugs. Statin drugs do not prevent heart attacks. Even if you lower a person's LDL cholesterol down to 70, you come in, we pat you on the back, and we say, you did good. Your bad guy is all the way down to 70. So we can prove to you that this drug or pill that you take will lower your cholesterol, your bad guy. But we never ask the next question. This whole group that we load all the bad cholesterol in, are they living longer? And the answer is no. Then why in the world are you spending $200 a month for a prescription when that could give you a motorcycle? Well, that would be brain trauma too sometimes. But the point I'm getting at is, do you realize what I'm saying? The general principle, and I'm going to be clear, all medications, even down to aspirin, Tylenol, even the ones that are over the counter, all medications are pro-oxidant agents to your body. They cause oxidative stress to your body. All medications. Can I be any more clear? What does the Spirit of Prophecy say about drugs? It says they never, and that's strong, they never heal. They only change the manifestation or the symptoms or the process of the disease. They never heal. Please remember that. Now that doesn't mean that if you're dying and I can't get your air tube open, that I'm going to do a trach right away, or I'm going to give you something, and yes, I will use steroids, and I'd recommend you use them if you're saving your life. Most of people taking medications now is not life-threatening. And by the way, you can say, well, you're going to shorten their life doing it. I go, you're right. But right now, they're shortening their life in the next 10 minutes if I don't do something. That's a real short life. We say, but doc, in 4 years, they're going to get breast cancer. I say, I hear you. But right now, if they would like their life saved, and I give them prednisone, I'm not really worried about, quote, not long-term immunosuppression. I'm trying to dilate that bronchiole right now. And if you were a 5-year-old kid with a peanut allergy, which by the way is a whole nother problem, but anyway, that would be a case I'm talking about. So where are we at? Statin drugs decrease the cholesterol production at the liver. What do you think that brain is made out of? Brain is tissue, and very few people eat brains except back where I live. Brain is the highest concentration of cholesterol of any organ in the body. If I start knocking out the basic ingredients you need to take care of your nerves and your nerve sheath, what am I going to expect? I'm going to expect brain atrophy. So one reason Alzheimer's is up is because when do most people start taking statin drugs? In their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s. And by the way, at least the research came out for the docs and said, listen, if you're going to give a statin drug, past age 79, we have proven it's not any more effective for them. Now I've got patients that come in the office over age 79 on statin drugs. Statin, levostatin, all these drugs end in statin. They're drugs that decrease the cholesterol produced by your liver. So they go in and they stop cholesterol production or slow it.
And they give it for...
What?
They end in the word statin.
Yes. Levostatin, all these prefaces, but they all end in statin.
It's like for high blood pressure, right? To lower your cholesterol levels.
Well, high blood pressure is a totally different area because we have high blood pressure and we call it a diagnosis. High blood pressure is not a diagnosis, it's a symptom. The real diagnosis should be endothelial malfunction or endothelial dysfunction. Because I can prove to you very easily. I can take a patient who's sitting in my office, their blood pressure is 110 over 210, and you've got them on all these medications and it's not helping because they're going through some major trauma in their life. They leave my office, go out on the main road, and they run into another vehicle. So I stick my head out of the office. I'm telling you a story here, obviously, I'm just going to make a point. I stick my head out of the office, and I see the guy laying on the pavement, and the paramedics have got his feet up, and they've got the shock trousers on him, and they're just trying to get perfusion to the brain. I'm going, wait a minute. He was in my office not that long ago. His blood pressure's sky high, and now they're doing everything to get his blood pressure up. My question for you is, what happened? He didn't take any more drugs? So what happened? He's in shock. His vessels have dilated. Well, if they can dilate here, why can't I get him to dilate over here and get him off his medication? That's the real question. By the way, we do take them off their medication because if they're willing to not mess up their vessels, you don't have to treat. But as long as you're treating symptoms, you're going to use symptomatic drugs. It's bad logic. Let me go on. Back to statins. Statin drugs decrease the cholesterol production and create brain atrophy, whether they want to admit it or not. And while I'm dealing with blood pressure drugs, guess what? What do blood pressure drugs cause for the brain? Hypoperfusion. You decrease blood flow to the brain, and what does the brain do? We starve it. So I should have put these slides on here. In MRI photos using an MRI scan, we show people on blood pressure medication with normal blood pressure numbers over the years and watch brain shrinkage. There's only one way to control your blood pressure, and that is control it through your lifestyle so your brain doesn't suffer and so your brain does not shrink. Any other way of controlling blood pressure is a farce because it creates a deficiency at the brain level. So blood pressure drugs and statins have to be put on the list for causative agents for Alzheimer's. And while we're at it, if you decrease the cholesterol level in production, what happens to your vitamin D level, folks? What do you think vitamin D is made out of? It's a cholesterol nucleus with some extra chemical groups hanging on the side. That's vitamin D. So vitamin D is basically cholesterol plus. What's estrogen? Cholesterol plus. What's testosterone? Cholesterol plus. What is progesterone? Cholesterol plus. All these hormones, male or female, have a cholesterol nucleus as the basis for how they function. So you start losing your hormones. You start losing your mind. Not sure which comes first sometimes. You go back and forth, and it's all one story. I'm not telling three different stories here or three different causes. I'm pointing out we've got a single problem that creates the issues that I'm talking about. What's happening in America? 85 plus years of age has 38% of diagnosed Alzheimer's. 75 to 84 has 44%. Larger in that group. 65 to 74, 15%, and less than 65, 4%. If I had a chart for today, it would look different. The difference would be the green group here would now be getting much larger. We're better at faking it for a while. And you know, these smartphones, are they really helping our memory or are they messing us up? If you have to remember something, you do what? How many people sit there in my office? Your next appointment is, and they get out their phone. Maybe I should be glad I'm not that high tech. I don't know, the appointment might buzz, or if it wakes me up at midnight, it's not worth it. I'm not against being high tech. I love to be able to hand my phone to a guy like this in the front and say, fix it. What's the cost? And I don't want to base health on dollars. But dollars to me don't represent a national debt. Dollars to me represent life. And when I spend $1 million on saving one baby because of a variety of reasons, a premature child, that baby owes at least 2 men their complete lifetime of wages. And the parents say, well, just do everything you can. I'm saying you're asking to steal from the rest of your neighborhood $100,000 from each one of them. And they go, I've never looked at it that way. I'm not trying to be ornery, but I'm trying to tell you that we can't afford it. Our medical system is broke, folks. It really is. You just don't know how big the loan is. It really is broke. You spend, or what in the past, you spend half of your whole medical budget for your whole life in the last 2 weeks of life. So if you come along and you live 78 years, you're in the hospital with all kinds of tubes hooked up, you spent whatever, $50,000 at this point in your whole life, you're going to spend another $50,000 in those last 2 weeks, and now it probably will be double that from what we're charging. And don't get mad at the doctors and the nurses. They still go home with their $1,000 paycheck for that week. And even if the doctor does some major surgeries, he may go home with a $4,000 to a $6,000, like bypass surgery. The thoracic surgeon gets $6,000 for the bypass surgery, and the hospital gets $90,000. Don't tell me about the doctors. Yes. We have traded medicine for basically big business. If all you had to pay was your doctor bill, and the hospital was a small percentage of the doctor bill, well, there's the problem. You found the problem. And that James Cancer Research Institute that I saw coming through town, who do you think built that building? That is millions and millions. It wouldn't even surprise me if it was somewhere near $1 billion for that whole complex I saw there on both sides of the road. I'm going, guess who's going to pay for it? Medicine is the only industry that can spend all this money and I can get the latest equipment and guess what? Pass the cost to you. And we say, oh, I have insurance. No, you don't. Insurance costs everybody. Oh, the government will pay for it. No, the government doesn't make money, folks. Sorry. Until we take personal ownership, that would make a difference. Now, what's going to happen in the process? When America's health care go broke, I'm sorry, when the reality hits, I hope that you have some charcoal in your house. I'm hoping that you have some Epsom salt. I'm hoping that you have a big enough tub to do a fever treatment. I'm hoping that when your neighbors knock on your door, that you're going to be able to be a help, because that is going to be your most powerful moment to witness, and then you get to talk about the real health message. Disease, number of cases, costs per year. Chronic pain, well, that's what most doctors, why would you go to the doctor if you didn't hurt? Most people actually come in with that. So we got $100 billion there. Hearing loss, well, if I could cure that, I'd cure myself first. Depression, look at Alzheimer's disease. Of the 4 million cases, which that's low, it's almost the top expense because of function. A person with Alzheimer's disease has got to be maintained, usually 24/7. And bless those of you who have taken care of a parent or someone close to you, and no one else will understand how draining it is, so don't expect them to understand. Just ask God for strength. And you hear people saying, I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to take them to some facility. By the way, I don't care how strong you are or what you've got in you. If you have been successful, give God the credit. But please don't blame someone who isn't as successful as you. It is that difficult. And there seems to be, in each family, the caregiver. Well, in our family, it's been my wife and I. And now my wife's older brother is taking care of Mom. She was 96 in August. So. Strokes, epilepsy, head traumatic injury, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, et cetera, et cetera. The reason I show you this slide is because 90 billion or 100 billion, the highest price tag on the list is almost Alzheimer's disease. This isn't lunchtime and these aren't noodles, okay? This is circle of Willis. Remember the way God made your brain. You've got 4 arteries coming in, 2 in the vertebral, obviously coming through your vertebrae, 2 carotids. They come up to the base of the brain, and then you have a circular vessel. It's called the circle of Willis. I mean, God is an incredible engineer. That means one vessel could be pumping blood in there, and it could go around the whole circle and feed the rest of your brain. Well, you've got 4 vessels coming into a circle of Willis. These are cross sections of the circle of Willis vessels in Alzheimer's and non-Alzheimer's patients. Now take a look. This doesn't take a lot of training. The top A, these are the circle of Willis vessels in those with no Alzheimer's disease. Do you see anything different from the ones at the bottom that are from Alzheimer's disease? Kind of obvious, isn't it? Now we're back to our hypoperfusion theory. You cut off the blood supply, you cut off the oxygen, you get atrophy. If you use a drug to try to deal with cognitive impairment, you're actually making it worse, folks, because it is an oxidizing agent, and that's already what's causing the scarring in the brain.
Didn't they used to say, though, they could only tell that after death?
Well, you don't want this picture before you're dead.
Is there a way?
Yeah, this is autopsy, see?
Okay, that's an autopsy. Okay. I was gonna say, I didn't think you could determine. Is there a way to reverse it?
But we can reason backwards.
Okay.
And if we see this kind of evidence, then we go, okay, that confirms the theory that I read about hypoperfusion. That confirms the theory that if I decrease the oxygen to the brain, then I have atrophy and change of brain actual structure.
Is there a way to reverse it once it starts?
I wouldn't waste your time telling you how bad you are if I had no solution. The best vessel here has got a plaque in the wall that's very fragile. And if you had a blood pressure spike that day, you may have a rupture there, and then I have a clot, and then I've got a real problem. We call that a stroke. But in general, the lumen, look at this one. This is cholesterol. Can you see why a doc would look at that and say cholesterol is a problem? Saying, no, doc, why is cholesterol there? Answer that question. Who's got it the best? Well, we're going to learn something about the world here. Look across here. Asia, Pacific, Oceania, East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Asian continent, European continent, European East and West, America as in North America, so that's us and Canada. And then we come to Latin America. We're going to call that South America, probably Central, Caribbean here. And then we've got North African and Middle and East. And then we come to SSAW, South Sahara Africa, and that's West. And we've got East, we've got Continent, and we've got South. What are they doing over there in the Sahara Desert? There's nobody there, so how can you get sick? No. The point is that they are eating something and they are doing something that's keeping vessels in the brain clear. This is the percentage burden of dementia for patients over 60. You can say, well, that's easy. All of them die at 45. No, we're comparing all populations over 60. You want to find out what they eat? Anybody ever go to an African restaurant? You realize that if they ever eat meat, they've got to outrun it? Which means you got to be in pretty good shape, right? Anybody recognize that? When you spice your foods on a regular basis and use this, for them it's probably part preservative as well as one of your most powerful natural antioxidants for your vascular wall health. And the same diet that I put you on for changing and cleaning up your coronary arteries takes care of your carotid arteries. There's no difference in what we're talking about here. So when you read about Dr. Campbell, the China study, when you read about Dr. Ethelstein, when you read about the plant-based whole food diet, you know, I've got to sing my note, but I've got to make it better before I start telling you the bottom line. And you already know what the bottom line is because you know me well enough, okay? The bottom line to taking care of vessels is stop irritating them. And Twinkies irritate vessels. Smoking is an obvious one. Alcohol is an obvious one. So stress is a big one because stress produces epinephrine, adrenaline. And adrenaline on vessel walls. Well, you may tell you the major one in this group here, it's your insulin. You go, well, you got to have insulin, doc. You're right. We even give some of these people shots. You've got to have insulin. But insulin is a very corrosive, inflammatory chemical to your blood vessel. So I'm not diabetic. Therefore, I should be able to eat all the sugar I want, right? Don't be that slow of thinking. In fact, you will be slow of thinking if I keep it up. Insulin irritates the vessel wall. So what do? You cause the least amount of insulin response possible with your diet to decrease inflammation, and what do? You decrease your insulin resistance as much as possible. Now, if you want to increase your insulin resistance, you put on a lot of weight. Works every time. Not muscle, we're talking about pinch and inch. The more weight you put on, the more insulin resistance you have. Remember I told you, we said that 1 out of 4 people are diabetic? They call them pre-diabetic. There's no such thing as pre-diabetic. By the time they give you, and they use the worst test to test you, and that's your blood sugar. Back to turmeric. Turmeric is your best anti-inflammatory, and it reads like snake oil. And you read all the effects of turmeric. I don't care whether you go online, go to journals, go to just the medical literature, and you just go, I can't believe it. But this one herb is about 20% of my herb business right now. One herb. And it's repeat, and it's building year after year after year because of what? People will buy something once. They may buy something twice, but not 20 times. So I take confidence in that the turmeric is doing something that is effective in changing everything from vascular to whether my knee hurts or an inflammation in the body. This anti-inflammatory agent does not suppress your immune system. In fact, it enhances it. So when God makes a compound to work for you, He does it right. Prednisone knocks out inflammation because it suppresses your immune system. Turmeric knocks out inflammation because it knocks out the oxidizing agents. And if you get rid of those. I was listening to a lecture by Dr. Thomas Levy, L-E-V-Y, if you look him up on YouTube or whatever. He is a cardiovascular man, and he was lecturing to doctors, and he got them really good, and I hope they listened. He says, listen, even if you use your conventional therapy, he was talking about their drugs, will you please give your patients IV vitamin C? And he kept going through, and he's a big vitamin C man, kind of like Linus Pauling. But the point he was making, every drug is an oxidizing agent to the body. Every drug causes harm. So will you please give your patients something that doesn't cause them harm? Turmeric happens to be an easier one because we don't give this IV. How about this one? Anybody have any of these this morning? Well, congratulations. Your heart is thanking you, and hopefully your brain is a little more clear. By the way, they taste good too. The proanthocyanidin, the chemicals, the antioxidants that are in this, is not just because of their color, because of what they do. These little round blue things will keep you, even if you're not eating correctly, to help you from blocking out. Now, don't use them for that purpose. Do not eat blueberries and then eat a Twinkie or your Pop-Tart for breakfast, okay? Don't miss the point. Sometimes our relatives come to visit. My wife's an excellent cook, so this is no problem in them liking our food. That's not the problem. But I remember my sister-in-law was sitting there at the table drinking her cup of coffee and taking her Shaklee vitamins. I consider Shaklee a good quality company. They've been around. They give good product, okay? That wouldn't debate. But what got my attention, I'm going, sometimes I just have to shut up. And that's one of those times. They're not asking for advice, we just get a good smile. I can tell you about it, but I don't tell them about it. Exercise associated with reduced risk for incident dementia among persons 65 years. Well, I got a whole nother lecture to talk before noon, and I only got 12 minutes. I guess I need to wrap this up. A few quick things. Okay. Exercise reduces incident dementia for people over 65 years of age. 2 levels of exercise. Both groups were exercising now, but they wanted to show you one thing. The person who exercises less than 3 times a week is obviously going to have less of a response to be dementia-free. The person who exercises 3 or more times a week has a lower incidence of dementia. Now, before this chart looks too bad, I want to show you something. The exercisers here have over their age, okay? When you're 100, they still have 50%, or half of the group is still dementia-free. If you're 100 and still have your marbles, you're pretty hot. That's awesome. But back here at 85, I had 75%. Back here at 75, I had what? Look at the chart, folks. This is amazing. Those people who exercise 3 or more times a week at age 75, I probably had 94, 95% of them that were dementia-free. Do not forget to walk. You don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to train for your 10K. Please get out there and move. It improves the oxygen. It keeps brain from atrophying. Also helps drop a few pounds usually. That's a good place to quit. I'm going to go to the very end. I want to show you something else before I do quit. If you think that we're going to run out of things to say, don't, because I've got a computer with me, so we're in good shape. We could be here for a week and not run out. Insulin action. Insulin is a necessary, I'm going to call it a friend, but it's a friend you don't want to hang out with too much, okay? Insulin accelerates aging. You will age quicker the higher insulin you have to give your body. Your pancreas has the capacity to go far beyond what you should need, so by the time you wear out your pancreas, you are way down the road. So there's people that think, well, I'm diabetic. I'm going, you're way down the road. Well, I usually don't tell my patients that. I try to say, here's what you need to do. Accelerated aging, obesity, obviously, your weight is going up. Insulin resistance is up. Adiponectin. Adiponectin is the chemical that tells you when to stop packing fat in fat tissues. In other words, putting on more weight. So we decrease this chemical that gives us the chemical message that you've eaten enough. You don't need to store anymore. You are in good shape. Some of us become resistant to that, and the level from the brain keeps going up, and you don't listen. And you go, hey, I don't think I ever overeat. I don't feel overly full. I'm comfortable. I want to eat. Well, then what you're really admitting is the receptors on the stomach and the receptors in your brain have gotten fatigued. And, of course, increased chronic inflammation. Glucose metabolism here, that's insulin. By the way, when God made your brain, He actually made a brain that can produce its own insulin. Pancreas produces majority of the insulin for your body. But in a brain trying to protect itself, it can actually produce, the brain's amazing. The brain can produce about over 2,000 hormones, insulin being one of them. It's not a major producer. It won't make up for all your bad habits, but it helps to save the brain. Delayed. Insulin action, delayed, gives you delayed aging and obviously longevity. You have increased insulin sensitivity. You increase adiponectin, telling you you've had enough and to not keep putting fat into storage. And you decrease chronic inflammation. So, what happens? Got a blood-brain barrier here, and we have a situation where we try to get insulin into the brain. Now, the blood sugar coming to the brain is going to try to protect itself. The logic is so simple because the same way the brain protects itself from high blood pressure by shutting down the blood vessels because your tender material cells, the brain can't handle high pressure. That's why we have so many strokes. The brain shuts down the vessels, you get less blood flow, you get Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Same thing is true for your high blood sugar. It may be 500 when I take it at your arm, but I sure hope it's not 500 at your brain level. That's why some people can have 500 in the circulation and not pass out. Because we just think, man, if you're 500, you're laying on the floor and you're almost unconscious. Well, why are some people sitting there and talking to me at 500? The reason being is because the body has a blood-brain barrier, and this blood-brain barrier is going to limit the chemistry, both good and bad, that comes to your body. Problem is, sometimes the blood-brain barrier is happening over here. We'd call this a barrier. We call this basically a damaged situation here. This is also your cerebral spinal fluid, so you're going to have some effect there. So really, this is cerebral spinal, this is brain, so we're okay here. The point that I'm getting at is that your brain is going to do everything to protect itself. In the effort to protect itself, it decreases glucose, and if the brain doesn't have glucose, guess what happens? It starves. If a brain doesn't have enough blood perfusion and enough oxygen, it goes into oxidative state and it shrinks. So what is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a disease of excessive insulin. That's why they're called diabetes. They've got type 1, type 2. Now the researchers are calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. So I hope you start seeing the whole picture starting to fit. When we irritate and inflame the body, we're outside of the Creator's will, we're outside of the Creator's design, and in fact, even His best design can't save us. So that's the gospel according to the brain. When you're outside of God's will in one area, in the area of your health, then you can't think clearly. And the Holy Spirit has to work through what? Folks, it's worth it. It really is worth it. I put a whole lot of value on my brain. You know how much I've spent on my brain in my lifetime? Go to Loma Linda and see what that cost you for your brain. How much money have you spent on your brain over the years? Some of you love to be educated. Some of you buy professional journals. Some of you read books. Some of you just like to learn. Well, if you're going to make that investment, please don't blow it on your favorite junk food. It's not worth it. Anyway, I'm long-winded here. I didn't realize my clock, but it's something I'm passionate about, and the reason I'm passionate about it is because I finally realized that Alzheimer's disease is in my area. I never looked at it before, and reading some of the doctor's work, I'm going to go, that's incredible. We know that drugs don't work. We have this enormous amount, like I read, 73,000 research articles on the subject with really no headway over the past 2 decades. It is not a research project. I need people to live the lifestyle. We are not required to lose our minds. And I believe it's another fable of the devil to take away your freedom, because if you can't think straight, how in the world can you understand your Creator? So, start the day on your knees. God can overcome any addiction that we have. God can make it possible. God wants to make it possible. That's the value of the health message. Then we can talk about cholesterol and Circle Willis if we want to, but God makes it possible for you to be healthy. Like that other powerful statement, heaven is all health. I'm going, what better can I say? No sickness, no pain, no Alzheimer's. I'm not going to forget your name. Well, wait a minute. If you haven't seen him for 1,000 years, no, you won't forget anything in heaven, because this brain was never made to be messed up like it is. Anyway, I guess I'll close with prayer. Is that appropriate? Father, we are in desperate need of your help. And we appreciate so much you showing us some things that I pray will motivate us to be willing to be with you in our day, in our diet, in our life, because we want to commit our way and walk to you. Please be with each person here. You know their struggles. You know the desires of their heart. And I pray that you will bless each one the way you know only best. In Jesus' name, amen.